All right, good morning, and thanks for joining us. This morning, we're going to cover Midwest Energy's new load control program, which is an exciting program that is beneficial to both the cooperative and to participating customers who are irrigators. I'm Mike Morley, Communications Director uh, for Midwest Energy, and with us we've got Aaron Romy, the VP of Energy Supply, who's going to be covering our topic. If you have any questions this morning during the presentation, we would ask that you please put those questions in the chat area. If you look up at the top of your screen, there's a little icon that says chat. You can just click on that and we will get your questions, and then we will cover those at the end of the presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Romy. Aaron?
All right, Mike, thanks. We will go through kind of the rationale behind the program briefly, and then we'll get into the mechanics of the program, the expectations, and how to basically apply or be eligible for a credit. So with that, we'll start moving through here. And if, like Mike said, if there's questions or if you have anything that comes up, he'll be moderating that, and he may interject during the discussion or at the end. We have some frequently asked questions at the end of the presentation that we've got from some folks that have called in with inquiries that seem to be a common theme that we've been addressing. So with that, why are we looking at implementing load control? As many of you probably recall, we had a program several years ago. It was a program similar to this, but maybe a little bit before its time. It required additional equipment. This does not. And why are we migrating back into that? Well, the question is around resource adequacy. Our planning reserve margin is increasing, and what a planning reserve margin is, for every 100 megawatts of load, we need to carry an additional 15% generation. So for 100 megawatts of load, we need 115 megawatts of generation. That's ramping up to 116 megawatts in 2026 and 117 megawatts with the planning reserve margin increasing in 2029. So what does that mean? Either we go out and we purchase additional capacity, or we find creative ways to reduce load, because there's two sides to that equation, as you can see below. We increase the supply side, the generation side, or we reduce the demand, the load side of the equation. Load control focuses on the demand side, and that's in the consumer's control, and there has to be incentive to do that, and that's why we're rolling out this program, which does provide some incentive to do that. So what is it? It's a voluntary load control credit for the 2025 year to the standard irrigation class, and the introductory or the rate that's going to be applied here for 2025 is $48 per kW year. That can change. That's the rate that will be credited this year, but that kind of goes along with market conditions. Is what's the cost of entry for new generation? Can we buy the capacity for the customers that are willing to curtail load during times of high demand? So rather than going out and just buying additional generation, if we have customers that have the equipment or have the wherewithal to want to curtail their load, let's compensate those customers to the benefit of not only them, but also to all customers at Midwest Energy. So how does it work? Up to 20 interruptions per season, June 1 through September 30th, and the key being up to. Will we use all 20? That's really hard to dissect, because we don't know what the summer will look like. We don't know what the temperatures will be. Over the last 10 to 15 years, 20 interruptions sufficed. That's, to hit the goals that we're trying to accomplish with load reduction. And that's why we settled on that number. The hours that we are eligible to call for this is 1 to 9 p.m. Will it be all hours between that? Not necessarily. It could be that the load shape only requires, curtailment from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock, for example. But that would still be construed as one event. So 20 interruptions, it may not be the full allotment of hours, but there could be 3 to 4 hours in a day. There could be up to 8, dependent upon the significance or the need that day for load reduction. We will notify at least 2 hours prior to the event. Our goal is to try to do this, potentially as early as the day before. You know, a lot of the forecasting that we do, we should be able to see some of these coming, but there are events that we can't necessarily plan for. Loss of generation or a much warmer forecast that manifests the day of. So there's things that will be outside of our control, but we will do everything we can to give as much notice as we can. The need for the 2 hours and that's somewhat short notice, but if we do have a generator unit that we participate, or unexpected load forecast higher than what we thought, or an imbalance between supply and demand, we need that 2 hours to make sure that we can utilize this to the extent that the program was designed. The equipment, we addressed this a little bit earlier. This is a byproduct of the AMI metering that we have already installed. So we can use this to validate consumption or reduction during critical demand pricing periods. CDPP, that's an acronym that we'll use throughout here, and it's essential into the calculations that you'll see later on. Communications protocol, we decided to go with text message on this. Notification this way is easily distributed. You can have multiple accounts or multiple phone numbers per account. With all text messages, you have the ability to opt out. And if you do so, you will no longer get the notifications, which makes it really, really difficult to adhere to critical pricing periods. So essentially, if you opt out of notification for text messages, it becomes really, really difficult to participate in the program. So just be mindful of that. Account credits will be posted after the summer season. The summer season extends from June 1 to September 30th, as you saw in the earlier slide. It will appear before the end of the year, which allows us time for account verification for each account to show and determine what the billing determinants would be. Deadline to sign up is May 15th here in 2025, which is 45 days away. So the calculation. So the load control kilowatt equals the highest peak demand during the summer season minus the average actual demand over the critical pricing periods. So what does that mean? So essentially your highest demand for any account, the average irrigation account is 35 kilowatts on a particular year, billing demand, interval demand. And what happens during the periods that we notify you, if you are able to reduce that to zero, and you're able to do it, and we'll show some examples of that here on the next slide, you would be eligible for that 35 kW if you have an average irrigation account multiplied by the $48 per year, which would result in a $1,680 credit. Again, that's an average. Not all accounts will be in that realm. Some will be more, some will be less. But one thing we did put into this is a participation factor. Originally, we started out as kind of an all or nothing approach, but really we understand things can happen, equipment may malfunction, and we didn't want folks to be basically disqualified from the program if one day for some reason they couldn't get to either manually shut their irrigation system off or the equipment that they were utilizing to do so malfunctioned. So that's why the 75% threshold is there. So we'll give us some examples of that here on the next slide as well. So here's a couple examples of load control. Highlighted in yellow, those are the critical demand pricing periods. So what you would see is a notification coming out, and these are 4 independent days. We can have up to 20 of these. For this case, I just used 4 days as an example to kind of give you a feel for how this would work. So in the yellow, day 1, we sent a notification out starting at 2 o'clock through 9 o'clock that we are calling for a critical peak pricing period. And you can see the interval data for hour ending 1 was 35. They ran up until curtailed exactly perfect at starting at 2 o'clock through 9 o'clock. And then the irrigation system came back on. And you can see they adhered to 100% of all those critical demand pricing periods and interruptions. And that resulted, as you can see below, right here, in a $1,680 credit. So their participation rate was 100%. Load control kilowatts was 35 because that was the peak that they had. We're just assuming what we see on the screen here is the peak. And here is what they actually consumed. And the way the calculation works, that results in the 35 times the 48, which gives you the 1,680 credit. So another example this is very, very good performance, but perhaps you have an auxiliary load that's always on. So your main pump is 35 kW, and I don't know what an auxiliary load, I mean, it could be a refrigerator. I know that's not a very good example, but just something or a light that's on all the time. So what happens in that case, your peak demand is 35, and you can see that auxiliary load hangs in there, and it doesn't go away. So what does that mean? Your 35, your average is 2 that you still consumed. So you get 33 kW, which results in a 94% participation rate, the 33 divided by the 35. And that 33 times the 48 gives you a $1,584 credit. Now again, we're using a $48 per kW year to, for 2025. That number may change, and I think that's going to be a direct result of what market conditions are. We don't see that number going down. There's more stress on the market upward than there is downwards. So here's an example of very good performance, but maybe equipment failure, or we could not, you couldn't get out to manually shut the well off for whatever reason. And they're on the critical peak pricing day 2. We ran through it, but the other days we were able to curtail, everything worked properly, and that still resulted in an 80% participation rate, because there was fewer hours these days, and you still curtailed for the majority of them, giving you an 80% participation rate. So we had, on average, 7 kW that was consumed during that peak pricing period. A lot of zeros coupled with the 35 gives you that 7 kW average, and the 28 times the 48, 1344, you were above the 75% threshold, so you get a credit. Here's substandard performance. So we were a little bit slow to curtail. We didn't get it shut off in time. On day 2, we ran through. On the third day, we were a little slow to curtail. And you can have it, this doesn't have to be a 0 or 35. If you curtail halfway through the hour, for example, it would be a partial kilowatt hour consumption, which would then impact your average. And in this case, the average of the yellow intervals is 10.6, which results in a 24.4 kW load control, which is below the threshold of 75%. 25 divided by 35, 24.4 divided by 35 is 70%, which results in no load control and no load control credit. So it's important, the more events, the percentages will balance out. I do believe, we're going to have more than 4 events. We could have up to the 20. It's going to be just a factor of how many of what happens with the forecast and what load and what variables we have throughout the season, as far as how many events we ultimately call. One good way to validate what your response to these critical peak pricing events is the Customer Connect on Midwest Energy's website. Essentially, that's a direct portal into your AMI meter to see your profile data as far as consumption. And it's done on a 15-minute interval basis. So you can see down to 15 minutes of granularity your consumption. So, after an event, or even just if you're wanting to see your consumption patterns, this is a great way to go out and validate this. There is some upgrades that are coming to where you can link multiple accounts, but in the interim here for the next couple weeks, you need to call a CSR to have them link multiple accounts. But this is a great way to go in and kind of see your load profile data and see what you would qualify for on an account by account basis, and also to validate your response to see how well you're performing if you so choose to participate in this load control credit process. So here's some of the frequently asked questions. Can I elect just a few of my accounts, or do I have to sign up all accounts? No, you can elect, as few as 1 or up to all. You may have, the ability to automate some accounts, and some are not. So you may choose to do the automated accounts where you can control those from from an app or some other device. What if I don't want to sign up? Do I need to do anything? What if I sign up and then decide not to curtail when I get the notifications? There's no action necessary. If you do nothing, you will notice no difference in your service or billing. There's no penalty for this. It's very much voluntary voluntary. And if you choose to sign up and then you decide not to curtail, you will see no difference in your billing. There's no penalty for it. It's just an incentive to have folks, if they choose, reduce their bill um, by voluntarily curtailing during those periods. Do all accounts total together for the 75 or 100% participation, or is it on account basis? Again, the entire program is administered on an account basis. So, if you choose, this goes to the manual versus automated. You may choose not to run out and shut the pivot off. You may sign up for it, but after it becomes cumbersome and you don't want to do it. So you don't lose the accounts where you do have automation, for example, or the accounts that are close by where you can get to. You won't lose that as it's administered on an account by account basis. What happens to the account credit if I'm no longer farming the same property next year? So provided the account does not switch owners during the season, and the reason for that is it becomes very, very difficult to then assign credits, and we don't want to have some ambiguity there to where that resides. So for that 4-month period, we'll need the account holder to stay consistent. And at the end of the season, then that account holder would be issued the credit, and then the following year would constitute a new season if there is a new a tenant on that account. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike. I don't know if we got any questions in the Q&A.
Aaron, it looks like we've had between 11 and 15 participants that have joined in throughout the presentation. We have gotten a couple of questions, and again, if anybody has questions that they'd like to ask, please go up into the chat and type those in. First question was, how many days do you think you might interrupt per year?
So interruptions.
Aaron, sorry.
So interruptions through the course of the year. We could interrupt up to the 20 times. In past, it depends upon the season, and I think the magnitude of the heat and how long. It's hard to depict. I mean, we will have to use this in order to make the program work. So, 10 interruptions per year up to the 20 is very, very possible. But it could be as few as, 5, 6. We really, really don't know. I think folks just need to be prepared for up to 20. Last year in 2024, if we would have been implementing this, it would have been 11 interruptions from the data that we have. But that's a look back, not a look forward.
Okay. 2 other questions. Second is the credit always at $4 per kW? Meaning if one account participated at an 80% rate and the other participated at 100%, would they both get the same $4 per kW?
They would get the same $4 per kW, but the participation rate, and that goes back to the calculation, which I'll bring back up on the screen. The average actual demand would be different, which would constitute a different credit. And that's where you see here, it's not the rate that changed on the 48, it's the average demand, which will impact your load credit. So the rate stays the same. It'll stay the same here for 2025. Now per season, the rate can change, but your performance will really determine what kind of credit you're eligible for. The $48, like I said, for 28 will remain constant. I think there will be upward pressure on that going forward. I don't see that being revised down in the future. And really performance will dictate the ultimate credit. But it will be the same consistent amount as far as effective KW rate for every account.
Okay. Second question out of that group that came in, what does one have to do to sign up?
So the sign up, there was letters that went out, and we also, there was letters that went out. There's also a link on our website under About and News to where you can find a phone number to contact. Rhiannon Korn is administering the program here internally. Her direct extension is 75-625-1428, and she will process your enrollment and get that signed up along with the phone numbers. If you're needing an additional form, don't hesitate to call in and we can send that out to you via email or mail. We have until March 15th to get signed up, and we look forward to hearing from you on that.
Okay, sounds good. I don't see any additional questions for chat, so we'll give it just a couple seconds, and nothing else has come in. So Aaron, if you have any concluding remarks.
No, we hope this is something that you guys will consider. We think it could be a good long-term solution that effectively allows us to get some money back to our customers through credits if they're willing to perform during these times. And um, you know, we look forward to the participation, and we hope it works for the customers as well. If they have any thoughts, let us know, and we'd appreciate that feedback.
Okay, Aaron, it looks like we did have one final question that did come in at the last second. When notice is given, will it also say for how many hours that day will be curtailed?
Yes, it will. So we will put out, and what we will do on the text message notification, we are going to put the date and the times starting at this time, ending at this time. We'll put curtailment event number 1, April 8th, 2025, from 3 to 9 o'clock. The next event will be critical peak pricing period number 2. That way there is a reference to that if there's questions that come in the future. And again, we're going to try to do what we can to get that out with more notice than the 2 hours. I mean, I don't see us doing a 2-hour notification for all 20 events. We're going to try to be very, very mindful of the impacts to the folks trying to get this and trying to utilize the program.
Sounds good. Okay, I don't see any other questions that have come in. Just want to say thank you to everybody who participated today. And if you do have additional questions that you think of later in the day, feel free to call us back in at the number that Aaron referenced that was in your letter. Or you can just give us a call here at Midwest Energy, 1-800-222-3121, and ask to speak with Rhiannon. She'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you again, and everybody have a great day.